I died on the operating table. Dr. Gillenoff, Dr. Griffin were my doctors. They witnessed it. They brought me back. I saw the whole thing. It didn't hurt. And I was looking at everybody running the room, and they were panicking. And I mean, they were doing stuff, but they were really scared.
Wow, you remember this?
No, I saw it. I watched the whole thing. And then I saw them put the flaps on, and then when I came back, that's when it hurt.
Control pass. One shot. One opportunity to stop the death of America. One moment with the freedom of interest. But with DC written, yo. Vivek's palms are sweaty, six big job gets heavy. There's curry on his sweater already, mom's tandoori. He's nervous, but DOD is getting order ready to drop bombs, cause he gon' got the fat with Eddie. He goes down, DC crowd cries so loud. He opens his mouth, the words you find just come out. They choking now, we the people joking now. The clock's run out, time's up, over, bow. Snap back, DOD, Elon, they swing gravity. Oh, grab your up, was he choke? He's so ready, no boast, make it look easy. No, he works at it, he knows he'll push him in. Gotta keep him alive. Stand together, stop World War III, make America great again.
Good day, Patriots. Guess what? We got a really special show for you today on a topic that we kind of all can relate to and are really curious about, especially if we're, Christians and we've all lost people that we love. Mm-hmm. And we always wonder, what is going on with the afterlife and where does the soul really go? And you don't have to be a Christian. You don't have to start off as a Christian to believe. But the topic today obviously is on, is there life after death? And, while we're living, it's good to make sure that we're also financially secure. So please make sure to stay till the end of the show to watch a special message and advice from Kerr Financial Group. So, Richard, what do we got?
The amazing thing is that you have scientists who are atheists who are doing neurosurgery, who are realizing that we're not just, our thoughts are not just the chemical reactions in our brain. There's something else going on. And I found this really fascinating interview with Dr. Michael Egnor, who's a neurosurgeon, I believe at SUNY on Long Island in Stony Brook. And he's done hundreds of surgeries. And let's take a look. It's an amazing discovery in his life about what he thought he understood was not exactly what he found to be true.
And from what I understand, he was an atheist, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Man of science.
Let's take a look.
Happened to me as a neurosurgeon and as a husband and a father that changed the way I look at the world. As a neurosurgeon, I began finding patients who had large parts of their brains missing. A good example was a little girl who was born with only about half her brain. And I counseled her family that this didn't look good. I couldn't be sure how she would do, but it didn't look encouraging. And as she grew up, I followed her, and she was normal at every stage of development, in fact, rather bright. Wow. She's now in her mid-20s and a vibrant, normal young woman, has a great job. Her mother says she's too smart for her own good, and she has half a brain. I have a number of other patients with major parts of their brains missing who are really okay, who are really fine. And that didn't fit any of the neuroanatomy textbooks that I read in medical school. There were strange things going on there. The whole thing kind of came to a head when I was operating many years ago on a woman who had a brain tumor in her left frontal lobe. And we do awake brain surgery at times. And what awake brain surgery means is that the patient is given a local anesthetic like Novocaine, so they don't feel pain. The brain itself has no sensation of pain, so it's just like cutting your hair. You don't feel anything. And we can stimulate the surface of the brain and get a map of the critical parts of the brain. So, for example, if I'm removing a tumor, I can find out what parts I have to protect and what parts I can safely remove to get the tumor out. So it makes the operation safer. So she was awake, and I was taking out the tumor and taking out much of the left frontal lobe of her brain, and we were having a conversation. And it was a perfectly normal conversation. It's the same kind of conversation you and I are having here right now, as her big part of her brain is coming out. And it didn't seem to make any difference in her conversation. Fortunately, that was the whole point of the surgery, was to keep her healthy. And after that operation, I thought, my goodness gracious, we don't understand what the brain does. There's something deeper here, because none of my textbooks said you could take out most of the left frontal lobe and have a person be perfectly normal. At around the same time, I had a religious conversion, one might say, it was related intellectually to some of my doubts about Darwinism. I began reading more deeply about the Darwinian explanation for how we became human, and it struck me as pretty weak science. I thought it was pretty bad science. I didn't look at it at that point from a religious standpoint. I just thought of all the scientific disciplines I knew, this is the one that I think was the least rigorous. But I have 4 kids, and when my youngest son was born, the first couple months of life, he wasn't making eye contact, and he wasn't smiling, and he wasn't behaving as if he understood my wife and I to be people. We were like objects to him. And I became frightened that he was autistic. And autism has always terrified me, the idea that you have a child who you love and want to connect with, and they don't even know you exist. You're just like a piece of furniture to them. So I was quite frightened of it. We took him to some neurologists, and they said, it's too young. He's just a few months old. You really can't be sure. So by the time he was about 6 months old, he still wasn't making eye contact and wasn't really interacting with us. And I was seeing a consult, a patient at an outside hospital. It was a Catholic hospital. And I was at a point where I was emotionally really, really distraught by this. I was thinking, I'm never going to love my son. I'm never going to have my son love me. He's never going to know me. So after I saw the consult, it was late at night. There was a chapel in the hospital. So I stopped by the chapel, and I went into the chapel, and I got down in front of the altar and prayed. And I said, God, I don't know if you exist. I don't make praying a habit. But if you do exist, could you take this away from me, please? This is something I can't deal with. I can't have my son be autistic and not know me. And I heard a voice, only time in my life I've ever heard a voice, and it was very clear, and it wasn't me saying it. And the voice said, but that's what you're doing to me.
Whew.
So I said, I kind of collapsed, and I said, okay, I won't do it to you anymore. I won't be autistic to you. But please make my son not autistic to me. So went home, and a few days later was his 6-month birthday, and he was perfectly normal. He's perfectly fine. He's currently a law student and anything but autistic. That complemented in some sense my discoveries as a surgeon and in neuroscience, that there's a lot more to man than just meat. That we do have souls, that there's a spiritual aspect to us. So I converted to Christianity, got baptized. Many people in my family also got baptized. Since I had spent several decades of my life as an atheist and a materialist, I kind of feel like I have a debt to repay. We wouldn't call it vengeance, but I want to convey to people that atheism and materialism are wrong, and that God exists and that He's real, and that we really do have souls. So I began looking more deeply into the neuroscience of the brain and the soul, to try to explain why I had seen these strange things with people with parts of their brains missing who were perfectly normal, that I can take out part of a woman's frontal lobe as I'm talking to her, and it doesn't change her. And I found that there were other neurosurgeons and other scientists who really had seen the same kind of thing, that I wasn't the first person to notice this. The greatest scientist in the neurosurgical profession was a guy named Wilder Penfield, who worked back in the mid-20th century in Montreal, and he pioneered the surgery of epilepsy. And one of his most common operations was awake brain surgery, the sort of thing that I had done with the woman with the tumor. And he did about 1,100 patients with awake brain surgery. So no one's ever come anywhere near that, those kind of numbers. Awake brain surgery is still done today, but if you do a few hundred in your life, it's a large volume. So Penfield really was responsible for a lot of the mapping of the brain that we know about today. Because he operated on all these over 1,000 people and mapped all kinds of areas of their brain. And he would map it by stimulating with a little electrical probe the surface of the brain while they were awake. And he would ask them what they felt or what they saw or see if they moved. And he found peculiar things, and that really surprised him, because he had started out as a materialist just like I had. He found that when he would stimulate the brain, and he must have stimulated the brain at least 1 million times in these 1,100 patients. Well, if you count out, say, 2 stimulations a minute, and the operations last about 8 hours, I actually did the math. So it's over 1 million stimulations. He could only stimulate 4 things from the brain. He could make the person move. He could stimulate the motor area and they'd raise their arm. He could make them have a perception, let's see a flash of light or smell something or hear something. He could make them have an emotion. There are parts of the brain where if you stimulate it, you can get a powerful emotion. You can get fear or joy. There's a part of the brain that makes you laugh, that if you stimulate that, you feel like everything's funny. And he could stimulate memories. He could stimulate certain parts of the temporal lobe, and you'd have a memory of your mother's face or a memory of a conversation that you'd had years before. But those were the only things he could stimulate. And what he left out is everything we're doing right now. He couldn't stimulate abstract thought. He couldn't stimulate the ability to contemplate philosophy or to think about the meaning of life. He couldn't stimulate mathematics. Nowhere in the brain could he stimulate someone to say, 1 + 1 is 2. He couldn't stimulate logic or history or music, all the different kind of abstract, higher level things we do. And he came to the conclusion, because he was a pretty honest man, he said, well, maybe I can't stimulate abstract thought because it doesn't come from the brain. Maybe the brain is necessary ordinarily for the exercise of abstract thought. If you drink too much alcohol or if you get hit on the head, you may not think as clearly for a while. But that doesn't mean that the thought comes from the brain. So he said that he called abstract thought mind action. He said that you can't stimulate mind action from the brain. You can stimulate individual things, movement, perception, emotion, and memory, but that's it. And then he looked back at the whole record of seizures, epilepsy, looked back at thousands of cases of epilepsy, and he found exactly the same thing. When people have epileptic seizures, they do certain things. They can go unconscious, but not always. Sometimes they're awake when they have the seizure, and they have movements or they have perceptions. Sometimes you have memories. Sometimes you have emotions, but there are no calculus seizures. No one's ever had a seizure where they couldn't stop doing mathematics. And Penfield said, why not? If mathematics comes from the brain, and there have been hundreds of millions of seizures, once in a blue moon, you trigger off 1 + 1 = 2 and you couldn't stop. He said, it never happens. So the same thing that he found with seizures is what he had found with the awake brain surgery, that the brain is an organ that only does certain things. And the main things it does, it makes us move, it makes us perceive, makes us remember, and gives us emotions. But it doesn't serve as the source for abstract thought. So that was a remarkable finding, and it's been pretty much ignored within the neuroscience community. You read textbooks and people talk about it. I've had debates with neuroscientists where they say, "Oh, that Penfield study." I mean, that was 100 years ago. We have much better studies now, and the reality is we don't have much better studies now. These were on 1,100 people, over 1 million stimulations by a first-rate scientist who studied the results. And nothing we do nowadays comes anywhere near that kind of detail and that kind of rigor. So Penfield's work, I think, is amazing. He wrote a book called Mystery of the Mind. If viewers are interested in that, it's available on Amazon, where he recounts all of his experiences. He also found that free will doesn't come from the brain. And the way he found that was he would ask the person during the operation, just raise your arm occasionally, just by free will. And what I'll do is I'll stimulate occasionally the part of your brain that controls your arm, and I'll make it raise. And I want you to tell me when your arm goes up, did you do it or did I do it? And they always knew. There were tens of thousands of stimulations. He could never simulate free will. He said, well, it's because free will doesn't come from the brain. It's a spiritual power. It's not a physical power. So that got me to thinking, and it made sense in light of what I was seeing in my own patients.
So, I mean, this is fascinating to me because, look, the world of science, it's always seeking a materialistic explanation for things. I'm not against that. I mean, if you can find a materialistic explanation for something, fine. But these are scientists who are finding out that the brain by itself does not, I mean, apparently, based on what he's saying, there's no part of the brain that generates mathematics, philosophy, poetry. Apparently, no epileptic seizures where people are generating calculus or whatever. I mean, and the issue of free will also is very interesting too, that there's no part of the brain, there's something, he actually, if you listen to the rest of the video, it goes more deeply into this issue of the free will. But the free will apparently is not generated by our brain. The mind, I think he would say, he calls it mind action. The mind is something that is not, it interacts with the brain, but the brain does not generate this what he calls mind.
So we're providing right now concrete information from neurosurgeons who have made all these reports of remove parts of the brain while you're awake through, just anesthetizing that part of your head. And you can have a good portion of your brain gone, and it doesn't affect your soul or who you are or what your freedom is. That's number one, which is a fact.
Right.
So people need to understand that because we're going to go deep.
Right.
And once you understand that, it'll help to explain a whole lot of other things. And the other thing that every time I see that part of this interview, I cry, which is the parents' love for their child.
Right.
And the fact that no parent wants to have their child gone.
Right.
You want to have that intimacy, the love when you hear your child say, Mommy, Daddy, can I have a hug? Can I give you a kiss? And I look at you like the world. And no matter what's going on, even in, the years that we went through COVID, no matter what's going on, it is that love that refuels us as human beings and gives us purpose to move ahead. So when he said, please, dear God, I haven't been an atheist, I hardly pray, but I do not want my child to be autistic to me. And to hear a voice, only God can say that. Well, you've been autistic to me as well.
Right.
And that is life changing, and our life is filled with not coincidences, but
Right.
purpose
Right.
and messages.
Right.
There is no coincidences, there is no accidents. Be aware of the signs that are given to you, because chances are you're given answers all the time, but sometimes people choose not to see them.
Well, let's do a thought experiment. Let's say he walked by the chapel and he said, and he was tempted to go in and pray, even though he didn't really believe in God. But what if another voice had said, you know what? You know, this religious stuff, it's a bunch of hogwash. And what if he just kept on walking and gone to a bar to drown his sorrows in a bottle, which many people do.
Yes.
And his life would have gone in a very dark. Many people have this rage and anger, and they feel God has abandoned them.
But they're being self-destructive.
Exactly. So the materialistic worldview that we have, it does a lot of damage to people because it drives them to despair, resentment, anger, and the bottle in many cases.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because people have hang-ups, and I always say that's related to the devil. I'll give you a perfect example, especially when you're younger, and someone says, oh, you know, like my daughter was a teenager, oh, I can't wear that dress again. People will remember from last year that I wore that at that party. Guess what? No one's going to remember, and no one cares.
Right.
And that's the whole point, is you have to get over your own personal hurdles. And this is why with age comes wisdom.
Right.
And this is why this particular man,
Right.
after having children and understanding that love and that deeper meaning, was ready to embrace.
Right. Yeah.
So as children, we know children are very selfish. You know, I want to eat right now. I want this. Because they know they rely on us, because they cannot survive on their own. And that's the way it's supposed to be.
Right.
Until they start developing. And that's a great word, developing, and becoming self-sustainable.
Right.
But you're never really alone, are you? And that's what we hope that everyone will have an opportunity to encounter.
Well, I think we have another testimony about someone who had a near-death experience. Let's take a look at this.
Sounds good.
In this case, the unlikely source was a woman named Pam Reynolds. A stunning array of scientific instruments and measurements were in place at the very moment of Pam Reynolds' death. The results were astonishing. At age 35, Pam was diagnosed with a life-threatening brain aneurysm. Her only hope was a very unusual operation. In order to fix the problem and to save her life, doctors would have to drain the blood out of Pam Reynolds' head. What's more, her body temperature would be lowered to 60 degrees. Her heartbeat and breathing would stop completely, and her brain waves would be flattened. Doctors who perform this intense procedure have nicknamed it standstill, because for all intents and purposes, Pam Reynolds would be dead. But what happened was so thoroughly unique and unexpected, Dr. Michael Sabin, a cardiologist and the author of Light and Death, made an extensive evaluation of the Pam Reynolds experience.
The process of death, scientifically, now is known to be a process and not a point in time. It starts with normal waking reality and ends up in irreversible death. During this process, the body dies at different rates. The problem we have as scientists and physicians is to determine when the brain is actually dead, i.e. when the person is actually dead.
In the case of Pam Reynolds, one of the surgeon's main concerns was seizure activity, which could prove deadly during such a delicate procedure. To guard against this and other complications, Pam's brain and body were extensively instrumented and monitored, which makes what happened next even more intriguing. Pam told the doctors she left her body and became a spectator to what they were doing to her body. Later, she was able to describe people, procedures, and even medical instruments she could not possibly have seen.
Pam Reynolds had a very deep near-death experience at the time that she had documented no brainwave activity, no brainstem activity, and actually the blood had been physically drained from her head at the time. So this eliminates the possibility that this was a seizure phenomenon, because during her experience, she had no seizure activity on the EEG. In addition, she had plugs in both of her ears, and so she could not have physically heard what was being discussed in the operating room during the surgical procedure, and she could recall the accurate discussions that were going on between the surgeons at the time that she was having her experience.
Remember, every bodily reflex was being monitored. She was in a profoundly inactive state. But Pam Reynolds somehow was able to describe a particular surgical tool in amazing detail. A tool which she would later say looked like an electric toothbrush with a dent in it. She even noticed that the tool had interchangeable blades and that these were kept in something that she said looked like a socket wrench case. How could Pam Reynolds have described with such amazing accuracy the details of what took place in the operating room when she was, according to all monitoring devices, dead? Dr. J.P. Moreland, professor of philosophy at Bible University, finds this kind of experience compelling.
The most provocative evidence for heaven from near-death experiences seems to me to be cases where people come back from near-death experiences and they have information there's no way they could have had if they had just had a physical experience while on an operating table. For example, some people come back and they're able to recount conversations that their relatives have had 5 blocks away from the hospital. In other occasions, people have actually had experiences of objects on the hospital roof or somewhere else, where when people go to investigate whether those experiences were real, they see the objects just as the people saw them. In other occasions, people have met dead relatives that died about the same time the person died in the near-death experience. And they came back and reported the death of a relative that no one there in the operating room knew about. Now, this provides pretty strong evidence that something more is going on than just a lack of oxygen to the brain.
Now, this is pretty amazing, because you have people coming back from this, apparently they're dead, clinically dead, and they know about a death of somebody else who apparently died that no one else knew about. I mean, this is...
So it's very interesting, because in our research
Yeah.
on the subject, this is not an isolated incident.
Right, right.
These are common stories that cross the ages, that cross culture,
Right.
that cross the world, really.
Right.
And they have very interesting commonalities,
Right.
which is the soul leaves the body.
Right.
It sees life. Some people describe it as true life,
Right.
because it's so beautiful,
Right.
and that all the music and art in the world kind of combine, and you don't want to leave it,
Right.
but yet something is compelling your soul
Right.
or someone to bring you back, because it's not your time.
Right.
And this is the beautiful thing about understanding the soul and the spirit and who our real creator is, because really the eternity is so much more exciting. Not that we're rushing to it. Please don't go into the light in your dreams, okay? You see someone dead. We're not saying that. But it's very comforting to know that there is scientific proof. The reason they made a documentary about this topic is because they cannot know, the smartest doctors in the world cannot come up with an answer other than that really happened.
Well, look, there is a lot of prejudice in the scientific community. As Dr. Michael Egnor mentioned, he never saw in any of his neuroscience textbooks about the things that he was finding. So, yeah, there's an enforced silence. I think many medical professionals who may be seeing things, most of them keep their mouths shut because they're afraid that they will be looked upon as unprofessional and not scientific. It may affect their career and so on. So it takes a certain type of bravery, I would say, for people the more and more it's coming out. And I think actually we have another testimony from an atheist who dies and is very surprised to find out that there's something after death. So
Fabulous. Let's take a look. There's hope for everyone.
I'm Nancy Ryans. I grew up on a small family farm out in the middle of cornfields, very northwest part of Chicago. I was a very weird kid. I was very spiritual. I looked around and saw that divine presence everywhere. I would tell my family, oh my gosh, God's in the trees. Spirit is all around us. They kind of looked at me funny because we were Catholics. And my family was pretty Catholic. They weren't just cafeteria Catholics, or they weren't just weekend Catholics. When I was about 15, we started having a lot of those news reports about priests who were abusing kids that were really becoming prevalent, especially in the Chicago area. And that's when I actually began to question my previous viewpoint about, is there a God? You know, was I just imagining all of that? And so by the time I would say I was 16 or 17, I had pretty much decided that God didn't exist, because if he did exist, how could this happen? And that cemented my movement away from religion or spirituality. I went into college and got a series of degrees in geology. So I became a really irrational scientist, very material focused. By the time I was in my mid-20s, I was a pretty firm atheist. After college, I worked for the Department of Energy for a while, doing very scientific things out in the Western United States. And it was mostly became scientific writing, because I was actually quite good at writing, and a lot of scientists weren't. So I would do editing for them for the journal articles they were writing or books they were writing. And that pretty much kept me through, the rest of my career up until my mid-40s. I was 46 years old. I had moved to Boulder, Colorado. I was beginning to feel a bit dissatisfied with where I was in life. Some things had not gone well. My marriage had ended. And I was in that point of really questioning what was going to come next for me. So I started looking for another job. I thought, what I needed really was another job, a different job somewhere else, or, maybe in Denver or something. A little bit later that month, between Christmas and New Year's, I took a week off from work. So I went out for a bike ride, just do a little bike ride around town, drop off some stuff at the library and run a couple of errands, and then go out on a trail ride. I went into a traffic circle. The bike lane that I had coming in just completely went away, and the roadway got really narrow. So I rode into it very cautiously, and I kind of eased my way in, noticing that there was some traffic coming in from my right, from the highway, into this traffic circle. And it looked like they were slowing down. At the last minute, that lead SUV, instead of stopping, she actually sped up. I was in a really bad spot because I was right there at where she was coming in. And all I could do, there was this instinctual response as I put my hand out. I have no idea what happened from the time I put my hand out till I ended up on the hood of her vehicle. So somehow I flipped up off the bike, up onto the hood of her vehicle, looking in at her. And she's texting. I'm actually trying to pound on her windshield. And she kept driving. She didn't see me like literally right in front of her. And I couldn't hang on. The hood of her vehicle was so slick. So I slipped down, desperately trying to grab onto something, but I couldn't find anything to grab onto. And I hit the pavement, and I heard the crack of my helmet, and all of a sudden she was over the top of me. Somehow my backpack got caught on something underneath of her vehicle. And at the same time that happened, I reached up with my right hand and grabbed her axle. I don't know how long she technically dragged me. It was at least 60 feet. And what finally happened is that the guy that was in a truck behind her saw what was going on, was able to get around her, and he drove his truck around the traffic circle the wrong way and just stopped in front of her. So I kind of owe my life to this guy. As soon as she stopped, I started trying to wiggle my way out from underneath of the vehicle. I got to the point where my shoulders were out from underneath the front of her vehicle. And at that point, a woman came up and she just said, "I'm a nurse, just stay where you are." And I thought, what's the big deal? I'm just gonna get up and walk away. And she said, "No, you were just you're in a serious accident. I just need you to stay on the ground." So when the paramedics came, they, of course, were starting to try to figure out what was going on with me medically. And as soon as one of the guys touched the side of my neck, I just screamed at the top of my lungs. It was just so painful. And that's when I realized I was in pretty bad shape. So they brought me to the trauma center. I had a head injury. I had the cracked collarbone, 5 ribs that were broken in multiple places. I had a collapsed lung, but the main damage was really to my neck and my back. The doctor basically said, well, every process in your back is cracked, and you've got major damage to your neck vertebrae and then your lower back vertebrae. So they called in a surgeon who decided that he could fix it. He was going to go in there, clean up all of the broken bits, and then put titanium rods up and down my back on either side of my spine. And that surgery was scheduled for the Monday after this accident, so like 3 days later. I had an unbelievable fear of death coming up to this. That was the biggest fear of my life, was the fear of death. I was absolutely mortified by that one fear. It paralyzed me in so many ways. So going into this surgery, I was really scared and almost had myself convinced that I wasn't going to make it. They were wheeling me in. They got me moved onto the operating table. The anesthesiologist came up, and, as soon as he administered it, within like 3 seconds, I was, drifting off. In a normal surgery that I've had a few before, it was just gray nothingness, and then they were waking me up in the recovery room. This time I drifted off, and I was even more awake than I was before the anesthesia. And it was that moment that I realized something really weird is going on here. I woke up, and what I'm looking around at is this beautiful hillside. It's sort of like in a meadow, so there's low grass and flowers all around me. But I'm on the hillside looking out over a series of rolling mountain ranges. And I thought, well, this is kind of a cool hallucination. I could do this while I'm in surgery. The first thing I noticed was this wave of peace. It felt like, standing in front of a fireplace when the fire is on and that heat kind of coming through you. It felt like I was being hugged. But there was this big moment of feeling acceptance and really just unconditional love coming into me. And it was powerful. And that's when I knew something was not right. And I thought, oh my God, I died. I thought I died. I remember being in surgery, and at that moment I felt love. I thought, I must have died on the operating table. The second thought, now here's my analytical science mind still kicking in. So wait a minute, if I died, what's all this? Because first of all, I don't believe in anything. Second of all, my parents told me that you're gonna go to hell because you're an atheist now. So I'm not experiencing either one of those. And that's when I really began to wonder what the heck was going on and why am I here? I asked that question in my mind, but then there was an answer to the thought I had. And the answer came kind of from around me in the atmosphere. And it was the answer of, this is your home. You're a part of me, you're a part of us. Welcome home. When it said that, welcome home, I lost it. Because I remembered. That's when it came back to me. And I knew immediately, oh my God, that life that I had on earth was just an illusion. That thing that I was doing down there on earth was really just a temporary state. And this is real. It was like so obvious. I all of a sudden saw someone kind of materialize out of fog. And she was very ephemeral, so vaguely a human. And she had what appeared to be long hair, but I was never able to see her face because it wasn't about her. It was about me learning what I needed to learn. And that's what she said. It's time for you to learn what you need to learn in order to go back and make your life one that would be worth living. And those are pretty much her exact words. And I'm like, whoa, I'm not going back there. What, are you kidding me? I am not going back to that place. She said, well, you've already agreed to go back. And I said, I was kind of going back to my younger self when I was kind of a pain to be around with my parents, because I was always challenging them. So I was challenging her, like, I don't want to go back there, and I don't remember agreeing to go back.
This is, I'm speechless, I'm sorry. I don't know what to say about this, but...
Well, it's evident,
yeah.
and another example.
Right.
Regardless of what you thought
right.
death would be,
right.
having testimonies
right.
of what it's like being so near and being pulled back.
Right.
And again, these stories are very, very similar about the feeling of love, acceptance, and the eternity, and making you recognize that the life you had as a human being is almost insignificant. I shouldn't use that word, but kind of like a testing point maybe, or a progression of your spirit to learn.
Right.
And now you're at that point where you see the eternity. But you know what's very interesting? Why did these people survive? That's another question. When a lot of people just die in the operating table, or they die from that accident or whatnot. And I think ultimately, and we'll find out one day, I'm sure, it really has to be your time. So maybe there was more that you were supposed to experience. Maybe there was more that you were supposed to learn in your body.
Well, do you ever feel guidance? Do you ever feel kind of like a spiritual push sometimes to do something, or
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I acknowledge it as I get older.
Right.
Because when you're younger, you're kind of conditioned to think that's weird.
Right.
And that you're being foolish.
Right. No, I think, I mean, I felt that in my life too, a strong push to do something, or, to work in a certain area. And I wonder, where did that come from?
Well, here's
Right?
another thing for our
Right?
viewers. Ask yourself this question,
Yeah.
okay? How many times you've been alone or even in a crowded room
Right,
and you feel something
right,
and you turn around and it's someone just looking at you.
right,
They were peering at you.
right,
And you felt it that you had to turn around, stop what you're doing to find out why
Right.
you had to turn around.
right,
And that is part of a universe
Right.
or an energy that
right.
we have no clue about.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's the aspect of kind of being faced with a very serious situation where you could feel fear or anxiety or worry or despair, but you feel peace and you feel like I am not just dealing with this or that situation. I am existing in eternity. If I stand on the truth, if I do what is right, then I'm kind of beyond the level of just worrying about things.
Well, here's the other
Yeah.
thing too. We talk
Yeah.
about near-death experiences.
Yeah.
What about near-death experiences for someone else? For example, there's an accident. Your child gets hit by a car. They're pinned,
Right,
and all of a sudden, a mother finds the energy to lift that car
right,
to get her child out.
right,
No human can explain.
right,
They're not all strong as cerebral like I am,
Mhm.
but at that moment, how a tiny woman could do something like that to save her child.
right,
And you're not a superhero. You're just an average human being
Right.
with a spirit
right,
and a soul and a purpose.
right.
So that is incredible in itself.
Well, I think we have a testimony from the well-known actor Jim Caviezel,
Oh,
who played Jesus. Okay.
could there have been a better person to play Jesus Christ?
All right,
than
he
Caviezel?
actually had an amazing personal experience. So let's listen to his testimony.
I died on the operating table. Dr. Gill and Dr. Griffin were my doctors. They witnessed it. They brought me back. I saw the whole thing. It didn't hurt. And I was looking at everybody running the room, and they were panicking. And I mean, they were doing stuff, but they were really scared.
Wow, you remember this?
No, I saw it. I watched the whole thing. And then I saw them put the flaps on, and then when I came back, that's when it hurt. But it was like when I first met God, when he asked me to become an actor, I felt this great peace and love. The reason why I'm talking about it right now is because so many people don't have the peace. They don't have the love. The reason why I brought that up is I felt incredible peace and love that's waiting for us. It was amazing. And I didn't, I had this, just hang on for a second. It was really calm. And I was dead.
It's absolutely incredible and reassuring on so many levels. And, you see someone like Jim Caviezel, who maybe is not your Hollywood type exactly, right? He seems so genuine,
Right.
and someone who you'd love to have for a brother,
Right.
someone you'd love to have as a neighbor,
Right.
who went into acting. You always wonder why, some people go into
Right,
their niches
right.
that they go into.
Right.
In hindsight, after seeing that video, it seems very clear to me, just like you would see for your child or for a
Right.
relative, when you know them your whole life and their
Right.
life, that there was a purpose.
Right.
So there was a purpose, I believe, in this actor to play the role of Jesus Christ at the #1 movie in the world,
Right.
to be able to have that message and to share, to remind the world that this pain, that this torture,
Right.
that this end occurred
Right.
for the salvation
Right.
of humanity. And it's the same story we hear from the others. So it
Right.
doesn't matter how much money you make or what you do in a career. But it looks like there's good news, folks.
Okay, are you saying I can't take it all with me?
No, not the money either. Although some have tried. The Egyptians have.
They-
When you were pharaoh and you died,
Right.
they took all their assistants and everybody and buried them with
They
you.
killed all
They
their
killed everybody.
assistants and
Make
buried
sure.
them together to make
Buried
sure they
together.
have servants in the next.
That's right, and all their golds and
Right.
gems. This is why the pyramids always used to get ransacked, because
Right.
they knew that all the, the valuable stuff
Right.
was in there. No, we're not saying to do that. It doesn't work. Look at the Egyptians.
It didn't work. Okay. No, that's and it's a number one selling R-rated film. It was in Aramaic. All right. So when I saw that movie, which is a very powerful movie, but I thought, are people going to want to watch this movie in the Aramaic language? And it was the best-selling movie. I mean, amazing.
There were times in that movie,
Right.
it was probably one of the few movies, and I'm not talking about horror movies or
Yeah.
anything, it was probably one of the few movies that my heart was coming out of my mouth,
Yeah.
and that I had to turn away during the parts where he was being tortured,
Yeah.
because it was so realistic.
Yeah.
And we're not even mentioning the fact that he almost died on the cross as an actor.
Okay.
So there's more to the story. My point is this,
Right.
okay? Our point is this. Ask yourself after watching this show,
Yeah.
do you think there's an afterlife?
Mhm.
And if you're not really sure, do your own research,
Yeah.
because guess what? There's a lot out there. And I promise you, you will feel better about the afterlife once you see what others have experienced.
And you'll feel better about this life because instead of getting caught up in the daily drama and paying the rent and the latest argument you had with your children, whatever,
Okay.
right? It doesn't matter. In the big picture, it doesn't matter.
All that will be left is love. We thank you, and we hope you enjoyed this special as much as we did. And we look forward to providing some more done along this line, because it's part of life. Death is part of life. It is secular. Secular.
Amen.
Amen.
Hi, this is Jeffrey Kurt Financial Group. Today is Monday, July 28, 2025, and a very busy week ahead of us, but also it was a busy week last week. To highlight a couple of things, first of all, the S&P 500 and NASDAQ both closed Friday at record highs. The Dow's about a little over 100 points away from a record high, and the S&P was up every day last week and is up 7 out of the last 8 trading days. So again, a lot of momentum, and the stocks continue to move higher. And also over the weekend we had the trade deal with the European Union, which again kind of makes the August 1 deadline, which is this Friday, irrelevant. So I don't know, a lot of pressure's off now, a lot of uncertainty with a big trading partner, the European Union. And so, those things from last week, again, help propel the stock market to new highs where we start this week. Looking forward, got a lot going on this week, a lot of earnings, and FOMC is on Wednesday. That's the Fed interest rate decision. Unlikely to do anything, but again, with everything in a dialogue going back and forth between the Fed and the White House, it'll be closely watched as usual. PCI, the inflation gauge is coming out. And then we also have PMI, which is the Purchasing Managers Index, which again is a gauge. If it's above 50 on the index, it's an expanding economy. We have been below 50 recently, so we'll see. And the big news again on Friday will be the July jobs data. That's coming out. Even though July ends on Thursday, they're somehow getting it done for Friday morning, with the jobs data coming out on Friday morning and could move stocks. A lot of earnings coming out this week. We've got 4 of the Mag 7. We've got Amazon, Apple, Facebook and Microsoft. So, those could move markets too. And also, Exxon, Chevron, MasterCard, Visa, some financials, some industrials. So a lot of earnings coming out this week. It is going to be a busy week. In total and in summary, I kind of think, the markets, aren't poised for a drop just yet, although it could be, any time given a news item. And I do think there's just a lot of complacency in the stock market. That the volatility numbers are low. There's not much danger being priced in the hedging area, and those type of things don't show any kind of worry. And so at some point I think that reverses, but for now the stock market's on an upward trend, and may continue this week, driven by some of the news items. We got a lot of them this week. We'll be back on Wednesday. Thank you for listening. Talk to you then. Goodbye.